As we're about to embark upon the days of Rosh Hashanah, just in a short week from now, days that are known as Yom HaZikaron, Torah describes as a time of Zichron Trua. Of course, remembering is a major motif, a major theme in the celebration and commemoration of the day of Rosh Hashanah. And although first and foremost, Rosh Hashanah being Yom HaZikaron is HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges us, there is another dimension of Yom HaZikaron which speaks more directly to us, and that is, as the words of the Tefillah in Musaf, the introduction to the Bracha of Zichronos, Ashri Ish Lo Yishkacheka. Happy is the man who doesn't forget HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Zikaron, memory, is a two-way street. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to remember us Latova, and yet at the same time HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to us and says, Ashri Ish Lo Yishkacheka. Happy is the one who doesn't forget the Rabbanu Shalom. The notion of remembering, the notion of memory, is something which is so basic, something which is so fundamental. There was a fascinating story that's told about one of the Gedolim who was known for his uncanny memory. And somebody once posed the question, how can it be this particular Rav seemed to remember everything? And somebody else who was very close to this particular Rav responded, no, the truth is he doesn't have a superhuman memory. He doesn't have a photographic memory. His memory is not all that different from you and I. How can that be? It's impossible. He never forgets a Tosfos, never forgets a Ram. Everything is perfect. What do you mean he doesn't have a special memory? He must have some great gift. Photographic memory? No. The response was given, he doesn't have such a special memory. Memory refers to things of the past. This particular Gadol B'Yisrael was always reviewing, always chazering. Every sugya was always playing out in his mind all the time. He was such a masbid. It wasn't a memory, it was a reality. It was in front of him. The Divrei Torah always in his presence. When we speak about remembering, so remembering becomes very, very difficult as memories begin to become more and more distant. They become more and more faded. The message loses its clarity in our uppermost of our minds and of our hearts. And yet, the way to almost overcome this human frailty of memory is to keep the memory as a reality, to keep it as something all the time. If it's only something that we're going to draw on special occasions, it's going to be very, very difficult for that memory to be as clear. But if the memory is not a memory, but rather it is the present, it is not only the past, then it will become part of our lives, part of our hearts, part of our souls. And that type of memory will never be forgotten. But the Torah tells us in this week's parasha, Kilosi Shachach B'Pizaro, the words of Torah will never be forgotten by the Jewish people. Well, what do you mean they'll never be forgotten? The Torah was given well over 3,000 years ago. How can we ever be expected to remember? If Torah was simply a past historical event, it would in fact be impossible for us to remember, to recall the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the words of the Torah. Kilosi Shachach B'Pizaro means that the Torah will always remain Hayom. The Torah will always be the words of Torah are new and fresh. I don't have to remember something that happened years gone by. It's something that's in front and center. It's something that stays with me all the time. That's the godless of Divrei Torah. They're not only things of the past, it's something very much in the present. And Ashri Ish Lo Yishkacheka, if a person wants to reach that pinnacle of Avodas Hashem that's described in the Tefillah of Musaf and Rosh Hashanah, happy is the one who doesn't forget HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The only way to do that is to make, in a certain sense, Rosh Hashanah every day of our lives. As the Balei Musar used to say, that the entire year you have to view yourself like it's Elul, and Elul, it's Elul. What do you mean? It's not like it is Elul. It's a week before Rosh Hashanah. A person lives their lives in the middle of January, like it's a week before Rosh Hashanah. In the middle of May, like it's a week before Rosh Hashanah. Atem Nitzavim Vayelech5780 was not only on Rosh Hashanah, but it's every day of our lives. If we put HaKadosh Baruch Hu front and center of our entire universe, so then it will truly be Asher Ish Lo Yishkacheka. When we speak about the significance of remembering, we are not only speaking about something for ourselves, we're talking about a legacy for the next generation as well. Only if we remember do we have that ability to transmit those memories to others. I was listening to the news this morning. I was driving for a while, so I had the radio on for quite some time. I'm sure many of you probably did as well. I was listening to some of the events, descriptions taking place on September 11th. All those very sad memories, many of us remember very, very well. Kilos Shachach, things that we will never ever forget. Those feelings just a mere 19 years ago that many of us experienced, saw, some of us literally firsthand, many of us as extended bystanders. And one of the reporters commented about the significance of transmitting the message to our children. And I thought for a moment, thought of my own children, that some of my children weren't even born at that time. And even those who were born already were very, very young, barely in school. And I have no doubt if you look around the community here, on the younger end, so many of our children didn't even live to see those days. They didn't even know. For them, it's history, something in the history books. It's something that, of course, profoundly transformed the world that we live in. We live in times now, historical times. We don't know what the outcome of the crisis that the world as a whole, the Jewish community, as a prat, find themselves in. But there's no question that history, in a certain sense, is being made during these days, during this very, very difficult time in the world. And Yetz Hashem, there's going to come a time when this crisis will be behind us. There will come a time when it will be something simply of the history books. And yet, when years go by, will it be something that we'll just forget about? And all the messages and all the lessons, all the different Musar and Chizuk V'Sorus, many things that we've spoken together as a Tzibur, many things many others have spoken about, will they just become, in a sense, the dustbin of history, things of the past? Or will some of those messages and some of those important lessons and some of that Chizuk and V'Sorus that perhaps we've been able to draw on over the last several months will be something that will be remembered in a very real way and to transmit to our children? We don't know yet how this particular time in history will come to an end. But we know, like all other events in history, both those that we see for the good and those that we don't quite understand the ways of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we know that we have to remember Zechayamos Olam Binu Shnos Vador is important for us to remember. It's important to us not to forget things of the past, and even more important to draw the proper inspiration, the proper lessons for ourselves and for our children, for the next generations to come. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us a siyata d'shmaya that as we're about to embark upon the last week of the year, we're about to read at Nitzavim Vayelech Kulchem. We're about to stand in a week plus a few hours from now, beginning of the Yom HaZikaron, the day of Zichron Trua. HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give us a siyata d'shmaya that from our vantage point, we should be able to say Asher Ish Lo Yishkachecha for ourselves and for all generations to come. Good Shabbos to all.